Hi, this is Jason from Geek Fever Games again, and we're going to give you one last bonus video here. For Queen's Quest, we're going to cover what all the different races, classes, and feats do, as well as what the monster types are, and how the different town spaces work. So kind of going through an array of different things. So here we have our race cards. Let's start with those. So first we have the Sleth, which you'll see on both sides of every race card, there are two different races. They both have the same feat, and they're both the same color. So in this case, purple. So the Dark Elf and the Sleth kind of share a card, but they have slightly different statistics. Here we have the Dark Elf, which has +1 speed on the battle board. Can wear all different types of equipment, and they have the stealth feat. We're going to talk about the feats later. On the flip side, the Sleth has 1 additional health, but doesn't have that +1 speed. Nice and simple. Then we have the red, we have the melee guys, which we have Stonekin here. Stonekin are flying, kind of like gargoyle type races. They have the melee feat. Very few potions in this case, but high health. And on the flip side, we have the half giant. -1 speed, +1 strength, as you would expect from a half giant. Also has another negative here because of that extra +1 to strength. His skills are going to cost him an extra 2 experience, but health is through the roof, really strong, slow speed obviously, can wear all the different types of items. Then we have the yellow survival folks. We have the gnome here. We have tons of potions. Gnomes love to run around with all those little potions. Everything else is pretty standard there. And dwarf on the flip side. He also has pretty high health compared to the standard, but everything else is pretty normal. They both have the survival skill. The high elf here has magic. And on the flip side, another magic race. Lots of feats. The high elves are very experienced as a general race. A lot of potion use as well. Normal equipment. Then we have the fairy on the flip side. Also magic. Tons of feats. Can't wear armor and cannot wield weapons. Now, there are skills that let you gain a weapon slot or an armor slot, so she can get some of those. But the fairy also starts here with flying. Very interesting character. The human has an additional feat from the standard. Kind of a smaller amount of potions, decent health, can wear all different types of items, or use all items. And on the flip side, we have the messenger, which is kind of like a holy, kind of like a lesser angel type race. And again, feats through the roof, health through the roof. This is like a demi-angel, right? So super powerful, but can only use miscellaneous items. And lastly, we have the Hawkman, which is, these are the two ranged races now. Hawkman has flying, as you'd expect. Pretty decent feats, a little bit less on the potion side, higher health, cannot use armor. He's flying, and so that armor is too encumbering, can't use armor. On the flip side, we have the wood elf, the other race with +1 speed, kind of, standard amount down the board here for feats, potions, and health, can use all items. All right, so that's what all the races are. Now let's talk about those feats. And then we'll talk about classes after that. So let's start where we left off here. We have ranged. Ranged says you can use X attack dice versus a new pack. So here we have our battle board. What we're basically saying is when a new monster enters combat, let's say that we've just added a single pack of poison demons, let's say, that entered combat. With the wood elf race, they are able to spend a feat to use X attack dice. X always means the number of that keyword that you have. So let's just say it's 1 for this video. Can roll 1 attack dice versus any new pack that has entered combat. So they're able to roll an attack die, and if they hit based on wherever they are in the chart here, of course I don't even have them on the board, then they would be able to do that damage. And that's kind of at the beginning of the combat round before the monsters even get to attack. So the point is that you're able to possibly take out a monster before they even get to do anything. That's what ranged is all about. Also of note, the ranged feat can be used at the very beginning of battle. Let's say that this is the way battle was set up and we charged in here with 4 different monsters, or they charged us, let's say. I can use that ranged feat against any one of these, even at the very beginning of battle. All right? That's how ranged works. Prayer, I think I talked about this in one of the other videos. Heal X damage. So on a friendly character, spend a feat to heal, let's say, 1 damage. And that 1 point of healing can also revive a character. This is the critical aspect of this. If that character's fallen unconscious, the healing can raise them from unconscious back to active status so that they can still participate in battle. Then we have magic. Add X to your die result, meaning any die that you roll, let's say you roll this and you don't like that 3, but a 4 would make all the difference in the world. Let's say it's for an encounter, or it's for a battle roll and you really want to get that hit, or it's for a recovery roll and you really want to heal more damage during camp, whatever the case may be. This says add 1 to the die result, and so now it is a 4, and you spend a feat to do that. If you have more than 1 magic, of course, keyword, then you could add 2 to any die result, and so on. So magic works. Survival. The recovery roll, which is during camp, if you remember, add X to any recovery roll. Now, this is kind of like magic, where you're adding to a die result, but this one can be anyone's recovery roll. So you're helping other people to survive. So during the recovery process, everyone's rolling a die and healing damage, removing status effects, all those types of things. This will allow you to add whatever that number of keywords is to anyone's recovery roll to hopefully get them to the exact point that they needed to heal a lot of damage or shed all of those bad status effects. Melee. Reduce a pack's hits by X. So let's go back here. Let's pull our battle board back down. Let's say that up here we have these 2 fire dragons. Horrible, horrible monsters, right? So they have rolled, and we just got, well, they hit on 3+. So we just got 2 hits. Well, a melee character can reduce a feat to remove any one of those dice, basically. That's removing a hit. And so now there's only 1 hit left from those fire dragons, which in this case would be, as normal, applied first to the vanguard and then clockwise. So there's 2 damage from fire creatures. That's how fire works. So this would be 2 damage to the vanguard. If this 6 was still here, then it would be 2 damage to the vanguard and 2 damage to whoever is next in line. So melee is a critical role to help tank in battle and remove hits on the rest of the party. Lastly, we have stealth. I'm going to pull down some dungeon tiles here instead. So let's say that we have dragons and demons on our tail here in the dungeon. What stealth lets you do is X pawns do not move, meaning monster pawns. So normally here, if monsters lurked, these guys here are 2 away. They would go 1, 2, and come right into battle, and these are dragons and demons. These are 2 of the best monsters in the game. So a stealth character can use a stealth feat to say that, in this case, 1 monster pawn will not move. So we can say, you know what, we're going to let the dragons in, but we're going to hold these guys back here. They are not going to move, the demons. And so now we will get into combat with only the dragons. Now, we might get into combat with these guys not too long from now, but what you're able to do is control how fast monsters are entering combat with you. Also, when you only have 1 monster pack that you're getting into battle with, it's actually a quick battle. You don't go to the battle board. There's actually a different rule on the back of the vanguard roll to determine how to resolve quick combat. It's literally a die roll, and then a couple things happen. So that actually may be beneficial. It may not be beneficial. Kind of depends on the situation at hand. Okay, let's move on to roles, or classes and roles. So, one at a time, we're not going to talk about the feats anymore because they are identical on the roll cards as what we already just discussed. But let's talk about how each of these roles work. All of the roles have the battle statistics in the upper right corner. They actually all say slow 5+. That's how every character starts unless you get a special from your race. But the roles are all 2-sided. It's the same roll on both sides. So this is the quartermaster. The other side is also the quartermaster, but it's the passive version of the quartermaster. You're only ever going to have 1 active roll per player. All of the rest of the rolls get handed out on the passive side. And the only difference is that we don't have the way to gain experience on the bottom. All right, so let's talk about each one of these. The ranger class is the quartermaster role, and the quartermaster has teamwork. And I mentioned this in one of the other videos. It's going to start based on the number of players in the game. Let's say it starts here on a 3-player game. You can spend a teamwork just like a potion. It behaves kind of similar to a potion. When you spend a teamwork, you let another player re-roll any one die roll. And if there were 2 dice rolled, then they'd re-roll both dice. So it's a way to allow other players, potions you can only use on yourself, but this allows you to let other players use or gain a re-roll. Now, you can only use teamwork once per roll, and if the player is also going to use a potion, they have to use the potion first. So usually players will want to try to use a potion. If they fail and they still want to re-roll, then the quartermaster can offer up a teamwork re-roll. Teamwork is gained back as the full party eats, which is during the camp phase. And actually that's for a 2 to 4 player game. In a 5 to 6 player game, we gain 2 teamwork every time the party eats. Then we have the search roll, which happens immediately after feeding the party. And the search roll, you get to roll and either hopefully not take damage. That means that the quartermaster fell into a trap, or spawning monsters means they just kind of were making noise. But what you really want is the higher numbers here to be able to find potions, potion per 2 players or potion per every player, and possibly gain food. And a 6 lets you gain 1 potion per player, gain 2 food, and find a lever. And a lever lets you add a hidden kind of a secret door to any wall space in the dungeon, which lets you get to those treasure chests that are otherwise inaccessible, or get around to a new area that you want to get to, or things like that. So hidden levers are very important. You can also do that in town at the cartographer, which we'll talk about later. The quartermaster gains an experience every time that the full party eats. All right, let's talk about the leader role, which has prayer. And it's the cleric class. So the leader role is responsible to move the party. And you saw that in the other video where I was moving the party and kept saying that that's the leader doing that. Moves up to 4 spaces on the dungeon tiles. Then when there is a treasure chest where we do a boss fight, after the boss fight, instead of rolling battle results, we roll a treasure chest result. We get a bonus die if we're at depth 3 or 4 in the dungeon. So the treasure chests deeper in the dungeon are better. And we can get a common item here at the lower level, but what we really want are those rare items. And you can even get a rare item for every 2 players, and in this case, also everyone could get an experience each, or 1 experience per depth each on a 6. So 6 is huge, right? If you're in the 4th depth of the dungeon, that is every player is going to get 4 experience, and we're also going to get a couple rare items. The leader gains 4 experience himself every time he opens a treasure chest. So he is all about moving the party into the dungeon, hopefully keeping the party alive, because everyone wants that. Finding those treasure chests where everyone makes out. All right, we have the warrior class, which is the vanguard role. Now, I did demonstrate a vanguard in battle in one of the other videos, but I wasn't doing this, and I should have been. Every time that the vanguard gets a kill, we increase the token on this track here. And what happens is at the end of combat, the vanguard gains experience based on how many kills he got in combat. So if he got all the way up to 5 kills, that's 5 cubes removed, then he would gain 2 experience at the end of that combat. So that's that kill track there. By the way, giants, when you kill a giant monster, that counts as 3 on this track. So if you're at 1, you go 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 4. The flee rolls here, which is a 5+ to flee. And then battle results, which is like the treasure chest results. But in this case, it won't give you rare items, it gives you common items. But you roll this after every battle, unless it's a treasure chest scenario. You do get a bonus die if there were 4 or more packs in the battle. Packs of monsters. And then it says down here, quick battle, see reverse side. This is the one roll that there just wasn't enough room to fit it. We have to flip to the other side if we want to see how a quick battle is resolved. And a quick battle is when you're in battle with only 1 monster pack. Instead of doing the full battle, drawing the tiles for the different types of monsters and rolling dice and adding cubes and all that, we roll 1 die for the monster pack. And based on its miss or hit rate, which is, let's say if it was a... just move these here. Let's say if it was greenskins hit on a 5+, so we only have to look at that. We would roll a die, and in this case, the greenskins missed, and a missed says that we simply lose a food. That is all that happens, and then there's no camp phase after this. We will roll battle results, no camp phase, so we would get some battle results, which is great, because we might get some items, but then we go right back to explore. That was if they missed. Now, if they hit, let's just say that they had rolled a 6, then they hit, we lose a food. We lose a potion for every 2 players. So you can kind of talk about who's going to lose those potions. We take a damage for every 2 players. And damage always starts at the vanguard and goes clockwise. And then we also roll battle results and no camp phase. And that's a quick combat. So 1 die roll, you see what happens, you resolve it. And that's on the flip side of the vanguard roll. All right. Next we have the Lone Wolf, which is the rogue class. So the Lone Wolf is responsible to move all the monster pawns. Now, usually this doesn't matter much who moves because they're just going to go straight towards the party. But sometimes they can go around a couple different ways and it's equal distance. The Lone Wolf gets to decide which way they go. We also have the cheat sheet here, or the chart, for how large are the monster packs in terms of number of cubes based on the number of players in the game. So for 4-player game, a small pack is 2, medium is 4, and large is 6 monster cubes that get added to the battle board. And that's based on when we're drawing these pack tokens, the pack types. We see that Sneaky in the Dark Forest is a medium size, and a medium would be 4 in a 4-player game. So you really only need to consult this chart once at the beginning of the game. Then hopefully you remember, it's always 1, 2, 3, or it's always 2, 4, 6, or whatever. You can also increase or decrease the game's difficulty here by reducing or adding 1 to this chart. And so if you want to play a hard game, you can add 1. Even though we only have 4 players, we're going to play it as sizes 3, 5, and 7 in a 4-player game. The Lone Wolf is also responsible to roll for the monster packs in battle. So every time the monsters roll, the Lone Wolf is making those rolls. Now, the reason this is important is because that means the Lone Wolf can use his potions to re-roll a really good monster roll that you don't want to have hit the party. So he's the one that can do that. And he gains a single experience if he is conscious at the end of battle. And that's simply every battle that happens, he gains an experience if he's still conscious. So he's a lone wolf. He's all out, for himself primarily. Moving on. 2 more. We have the Lore Master role. Lore Master is responsible to deal with all the encounters. And I mentioned this in one of the other videos, that some of the encounter results are written in green. And green means that he gains experience, 2 experience, based on the encounter outcome. So if the encounter results were a green line of text, he gains 2 experience. So he is responsible to draw and resolve the encounters, roll any dice on the encounters, and make any decision on the encounters. Nice and easy. And lastly, we have the Scout. The Scout is responsible to explore in the dungeon, which means every time we explore, we draw a tile, and then a second tile, as long as there's still enough tiles and there's spots to continue to explore. We have a cheat sheet here for the tile placement priority, opening to opening first, and then we have to make treasure chests inaccessible, if you remember. Every time that we place a tile that has a monster lair, it spawns 2 whenever it's placed. And we remind them here that they can descend down to the next level of depth in the dungeon only after 6 tiles of the current depth and the relic has been returned. So we can't just go from depth 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and find the shrine in the first step each time. We have to have at least 6 tiles. We have to find the shrine, get the relic, return the relic to town, then we're able to continue down to the next layer of depth. And he gains 2 experience every time he places a tile next to 3 other tiles in the dungeon. Okay, that is all the races. That's the classes. That's the feats. Let's really quick talk about the different monster types. And on the battle board, in the top and the bottom, I'm just going to take some of these off here. In the top and the bottom rows, we actually have a little cheat sheet here for how all the different monster types work. So giants takes 2 damage to kill a giant. So this little pack here of 3 giant greenskins, it actually takes 2 dice hits in order to take one of those cubes off. So you can't just roll 1 hit and take a cube off like any other monster. It takes 2. Very hard to kill. Fire, like we have these fire dragons up here, every time they hit us, they do 2 damage apiece. Super brutal. The unholy monsters, we have these 2 unholy insects here. Every time they hit us, they give us a weak status effect. And weak says, let's say that they weaken the yellow character here. Yellow gets moved down and no longer hits on a 4+, now only hits on a 5+. They're weakened. Horrible. Down here we have poison monsters. Poison monsters, every time they hit us, we get a poison status effect, which can do damage during the camp phase unless we properly recovered from it. Ice monsters, every time they hit us, we get a slow status effect, which means that, let's say that this poor yellow hero here has been weakened and now also slowed. We move him over to the right, so now he goes later on in the round. And lastly, sneaky just as inverse damage order, which means that every time they hit the party, they're going to start at the player to the right of the vanguard and go counterclockwise instead of starting with the vanguard and going clockwise. Okay, now let's talk about the different town tiles. So, for each of the town tiles, they all do something different, and we'll go in order from numerically 1 to 2. The numbers really don't mean anything other than the order that we made the tiles in. So, in this case, we have the shop. We have, upon return to town, we're going to draw some common items, put them beside it. Whoever goes to this one space in the shop can take one of those common items. On the flip side, for larger player games, we have 2 spaces, and we draw an extra common item. The church, when you go there, we gain the haste and the strong status effects, or buffs. And that means that you, on the battle board, move yourself up and to the left 1 space. Crucial in the very beginning of the game because everyone starts in that kind of slow and 5+, so they're not very strong and not very fast, especially for stealth characters who care about the speed. This is going to be a very important space to go to. Larger player games, 2 spaces. Then we have the hall. When we return to town, we draw 2 skills and we place them beside the hall. Anyone can go to the hall space and train, meaning take one of those skills at -1 experience cost. On the flip side, there are 2 spaces to do that. The cartographer, draw a dungeon tile, place it on the top or the bottom. So what this means is you can, if you go to the space, you can look at the top card on any one of the dungeon depths. Decide whether or not you want to place that back on the top of the dungeon stack or the bottom. So if you see a monster lair, or worse, 2 monster lairs on a particular card, you may want to ditch that and put it at the bottom. Of course, if it's the shrine or something like that, you may want to leave it right on the top. But also, we get another bonus here. When we go to the cartographer, we can also place a cover tile, and this means anywhere in the dungeon. This is crucial because you don't have to be at the current depth. Like when the quartermaster in the search results rolls a 6, they can add a cover tile. That has to be in the current depth. Whereas here, we can place this cover tile anywhere in the dungeon. So you may know that you need to get around to a certain area or want to get to a treasure chest. The cartographer will let you do that. And on the flip side, as usual, we have a large building with 2 spaces. The Dark Circle, actually in a small player game, 1 to 3 players, we just have artwork. This tile does nothing. It's kind of like the starts of a Dark Circle with stones in a circle. But on this side, we have the very interesting, we draw a rare item and place it beside the Dark Circle. Every time we return to town, anyone that goes to that Dark Circle can take the item, but they also draw a pact token. And if you remember, the pact tokens all say either pure, dark, or vile. And those, the dark and the vile tokens, will hurt the party later on in the game. You can consult the rules for how that works. Then we have the farm. 1 space in the farm, gain a food. And this is the same whether it's 1 to 6 players. Both sides are identical. So it's simply a way to start diving into the dungeon with an extra food. Normally you start at 5. This would let you start at 6. Here we have the Colosseum. And the Colosseum has 4 spots. Again, on both sides of the tile. It's identical. Or if anyone wants to go here, they're going to be able to gain 2 experience just for going to the Colosseum. They kind of train with whoever else is there, basically. And that's it. Just a way to gain some experience. The Queen's Citadel. Super important tile. Just as it says, it does nothing. It is artwork only, but we thought it would be really cool to include where the Queen actually is. That's her right there with her crown or whatever that's called on it. But it's just some artwork, and it's her nice little castle or citadel where she is sending us out from to go on her quest. So both sides are just artwork. And lastly, we have the town start space for the party, which is here. And this is now the unexplored opening that we start exploring the dungeon from. Other than that, it's artwork. We have little houses and a fence and a lake. that is it for the town tiles. So with that, there are a couple other nuances in the game that we haven't really covered. Let's say that we have a boss fight and we draw these two tiles. Let's say that we drew Poison and Unholy. And let's say that it's a pack size of 2. So what that means is we actually take 2 cubes of Unholy, we take 2 cubes of Poison, and we actually place them on top of each other like this. So I have the Unholy Poison and Unholy Poison, and let's say that they were insects. They would both go on the board there. And now every time we get a hit on the insect pact, we take off a stack of the cubes. For the Vanguard purposes, that's still only considered 1 cube. It's just that they're stacked on top of each other. But the really important thing here is every time the insects attacked us, if they hit us, they're going to give a poison token and a weaken status effect. Poison status effect, weaken status effect for every hit, because they have both of the different types that are there. If you had, let's say, Unholy Giants, which is probably one of the worst situations, or giant fire monsters or something like that, now they're harder to kill, and they still give out the status effect whenever they damage us. So that's how bosses work. They get two different stacks. Also, boss fights, the boss pack, whatever it turns out to be, will always be of the largest size. So if it was a, if it's a 3-player game, I think we have 1, 2, 3, the largest size would always be 3, so we add 3 stacks of those 2 different types. That's how boss fights work. And the last thing I want to talk about was kind of keeping status effects. So let's say that we have here, we have our Wood Elf, and the Wood Elf has haste and strong. During the recovery phase, on the roll, if you remember, what we're able to do is shed bad status effects and heal ourselves. But one of the things you can also do is, depending on the roll, if you're going to be able to heal, let's say, 2 damage or more, you can actually sacrifice 2 of those healings. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you're already at full. You can sacrifice 2 healing to save 1 of your status effects. So if I got a result of heal 3 and get rid of a status effect, I can instead heal only 1, so -2, and I can say I want to keep haste because I really want haste as this character. The strong still has to go away. Otherwise, if I don't get enough healing and I don't want to sacrifice the healing, then I have to get rid of all of the buffs at the end of the recovery phase. You don't get to keep those from one combat to a next unless you have that type of a die result. And with that, I think we've covered most of the nuances in the game. Obviously, it's got a lot of depth to it. It's meant to. This is a deep dungeon crawler. It's a retro roguelike style, so it pulls in so many of the aspects from traditional roguelikes. We're very proud of what this game feels like when you're going through it. Hope you enjoy it and can check it out at some point. Thanks so much for listening to all these videos. Take care. Bye.